Not to pivot away too quickly from the cold weather games, but we have some breaking news. You think I'm like, oh, breaking news. Like you're going to be like shocked.
Let's hear it, Will.
Oh, I want to hear. I'm about to get on Twitter right now. What's going on?
Pete Carroll is out as Seahawks coach.
No.
That is not that shocking, though.
Really? That's not shocking to you?
No, because we heard rumors this year about that there might be a time for him to step down, and maybe, just maybe, there's a guy who has some experience there, coached them back when they won a Super Bowl. And will be a really, really good fit there, Dan Quinn of the Cowboys. And so I think what makes this really, really interesting now is let's just say, for example, Green Bay goes into Dallas and beats the Cowboys. Mm-hmm. And you're Jerry Jones, who was very non-committal about Mike McCarthy and kind of wait and see how things go.
I love how this is playing.
What do you do? Because now you're going to be in competition with Dan Quinn. Like, is Jerry Jones going to lock him up in his huge estate there in Dallas? And like, you're not going to Seattle. I'm not letting you out of here.
Well, I'm so glad you said that because we were actually talking about this last week on the podcast, and me and Ryan Wilson were saying there's no way if they lose in the wild card round that McCarthy's staying around because they built that team to make a run at least at the NFC Championship game, bare minimum. I think it's NFC Championship or bust for Mike McCarthy this year just because the way this team is constructed. So that's an interesting point. If Green Bay somehow, which Green Bay's had a lot of success, they won the last 4 against the Cowboys. They've never lost at AT&T Stadium. Now, again, that was Aaron Rodgers as quarterback. But it'd be real interesting to see now that the Seattle job is available, what would Dan Quinn do? Would he want to stay in Dallas or would he want to go to Seattle?
I was just going to say real quickly, the Seahawks have actually issued a statement. After thoughtful meetings and careful consideration for the best interest of the franchise, we have amicably agreed with Pete Carroll that his role will evolve from head coach to remain with the organization as an advisor. And I think that's interesting because it's basically like, look, Pete, I mean, Pete said earlier this week, they're like, do you expect to be back? He's like, I expect to be back at this point. And to your point on Dallas, if you think Dan Quinn is the guy for Seattle, you have to go kind of quick on this, right?
Well, you still have to go through the proper interview process.
Exactly.
In Seattle, right?
No, I mean, you have to open the job up if you want to be involved in whoever.
And by the way, like, you know, you're going to call Bill Belichick, have a conversation. You're going to call Jim Harbaugh. Look, I would call.
You cannot have Jim Harbaugh replace Pete Carroll. That would be wild as hell.
Why can't you?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. But
what's your deal, bro?
You would call all those candidates.
For
Mike
sure.
Mike Vrabel. You call all those candidates. You have those conversations, and you figure out kind of where you're at that point. I actually find the whole Dan Quinn situation more interesting because let's just look at Atlanta, for example. Atlanta didn't get involved in the quarterback market when they could have for Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
All right. He's the MVP this year. They're the number 1 team in the AFC. They're the number 1 team in the league, depending on how you look at them. Yeah. Dan Quinn's not one of the hot coaching candidates, and yet he was your head coach, took you to your Super Bowl, but you let him go. Like, I look at those sorts of organizational decisions where they go through a rough patch, and I look at it in a similar light to like what Amy Sistrunk Adams has done in Tennessee. Like, I didn't like the move of firing Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, I didn't.
And now you look at the fact that, well, he's going to be a guy that Seattle brings in, right? I could easily see him going out there and taking over that job if it's not New England or where
I was saying
he becomes a top candidate.
Yeah.
So it's just funny to me how, like, we look at some of these coaches who get cycled through, and it's like, well, maybe they should have stayed in the place that they were at in the first place if the owners just had the ability to say, let's just stay the course here. Like, we feel like we've got the guy. We're just going through a rough patch. And that happens. Like, that happens from time to time. I just kind of find that as an interesting observation.
Well, we talked about that before, Brady. We were like, there's probably going to be 8 to 10. It looks like we're going to be right as far as head coaching vacancies. And we're like, you better be damn sure if you're ownership that you're firing the guy that potentially can't lead your franchise in the future because it's going to be a carousel going around. And if you fire your guy, like you said, he's a hot commodity and 3 other 4 teams want him, are you making the right decision? You better have a concrete plan in place because if not, you'll have these issues that the Carolina Panthers are having, the Atlanta Falcons are having, and then you'll keep firing coaches every 2 years. So the Tennessee thing was a little interesting just because, you know, when you hire a new GM, they kind of want to bring their own guy in. Yeah. You get one like trial year to kind of rectify things. And there was rumors that him and Rand Carthon didn't get along. We know he didn't get along with John Robinson either. So we know that
John Robinson just traded A.J. Brown. That will do that as well too. But there's rumors that he's hard to work with. But we know his players love to play for him, and he's a demanding coach.
But like you said, Vrabel's going to be a hot commodity.
I look at situations too, like the New Orleans Saints, and I wonder, like, or even the Chicago Bears, when you retain a head coach, you might make other moves, but then you see a guy who gets on the market, like a Mike Vrabel or obviously Pete Carrolls there. Yeah. Do you then go, we kind of like that guy a lot? Like, what happens if we get up that guy,
Well, and I think it's interesting too. You think about this like with college coaches too, and I bring this up just because as an NC State fan, Carolina fans are sick of Mac Brown. They're like, no, I'm just saying they're like, and we're like, yes, by all means, fire Mac Brown in a cycle with all these big name colleges also searching for coaches. Good luck finding somebody who's going to do better than him. And I think that's what you look at with the Titans. It's like you realize that this is going to be the busiest head coaching cycle in the last 5 years, and the Tennessee Titans, with maybe a quarterback, Jeffrey Simmons, and nothing else really, are going to be like, hey, who wants to come to Nashville and work here? I mean, that's why it's a questionable move. I think with Seattle, you have a team that has it's a good time. Pete Carroll rebuilt this team and gets to go out on a high note. He sold low or sold high, I guess, on Russell Wilson at the right time.
Not low, sold high.
Yeah, brought low, sold high.
Well, he sold high on Russ, about as high as you could sell on Russ.
Yeah.
He got multiple first-round picks from the Broncos.
Well, that's what we're saying. Sure. He's like, he brought him low with third-round pick.
Yeah,
he didn't pay him, but he still wasn't making crazy top quarterback money. But and then you got so much in return for him.
Did anyone really win in that? I mean, you'd say Seattle
won huge.
To get Witherspoon. Well, because they get Witherspoon.
Charles Cross, Witherspoon, Drew Lock.
I understand based on like what they got, but I'm just saying like it hasn't really led them anywhere. And now they
went to the playoffs and went 9-8 this year. I think you can argue that they won the trade pretty easily.
I mean, a lot of people thought last year they were going to be probably picking top 5, and they went to the playoffs.
Yeah,
but you'd also be someone who would be like definitively the Rams won the Goff Stafford trade. Like you would probably say that, Will.
I think both teams won that trade.
Okay, that's fair.
I was about to say, I would say if you look in totality and if you look at what each has done, now again, Stafford has the ring, so you're always going to ultimately say the Rams won.
Goff has taken
they both have the same amount of wins. They have like the same completion percentage and everything. So.
Goff has won a division.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I think that's like Will said, I think that's a win-win for both teams.
Yeah, I think the Rams, Goff, Stafford is a win-win. Goff reinvented his career. The Lions are the best team in that division now. The Lions have a Super Bowl window. And Stafford won a ring and is cementing his Hall of Fame legacy. So I think both teams won that trade. I think Denver lost the Russ trade bad, like one of the worst trades we've seen in a long time. You give up a bunch of
no, they've given up a lot. I guess my question just is, I mean, if they didn't sign Russ to the contract, which doesn't have anything to do with the trade, right? That was Denver's decision.
It happened after, yeah.
Okay.
I would still think because the compensation.
The contract makes it look bad.
It makes it look awful.
I mean, the contract makes it look awful, but when you traded for Russ, you knew you had to give him a contract.
You got to give him some money. Yeah. Yep.
Well, sure, but I'm just saying those are two separate transactions. That's all I'm saying.
I link them together. I think we're being
link them together. Yes.
So the Montez Sweat trade. Do you not link him getting a new deal as part of the?
No, I'm saying they're two separate transactions, though.
The Chase Claypool trade. Do you not include the? No.
Oh my God!
Let's go back to the Seahawks though. So you think where? All right. So I've got the ranking the NFL head coaching vacancies article, and I currently have Washington 1 because I think
as the best place to go.
I think ownership. I think the ownership change and like the history of that franchise. And you open a quarterback.
They have a terrible name. Let's just start there. Can you change?
They have to get a quarterback.
If you go there, can you change the name?
Josh Harris is open to changing the name. He's open. But they have the number 2 overall pick, so you can get one of these quarterbacks in this draft class if you like one of them.
I'm just thinking Bulls. Like, why not the Washington Bulls? Is it too close to the Bills? I don't know. It's just coming to me right now.
Too close to the Bullets, I think. How about is it because I'm wearing the Bulls hat?
That was the hat. There you go.
Why don't we call him the? You know what? I can't say what I was gonna make a joke.
Oh my goodness!
Why don't we call them? Okay, so Washington 1 for me. I think the top 4 are pretty close. Washington 1, Chargers 2, Falcons 3, Raiders 4, big gap, Titans, bigger gap, Panthers. Where was Seattle?
You didn't throw Seattle in there.
I know. Where would Seattle slot in there? Where do you think?
Oh, Seattle's definitely in the top 4.
Seattle be up
For sure,
top
for sure.
2.
I would say 2. Honestly, I would say Chargers then Seattle. Then honestly, I would go Falcons then Commanders.
Look, I mean, here's the thing. with Washington, you've got some pieces, but there's a decent amount of building to do. However,
For sure.
you have the ability to do so with new ownership, et cetera. But you need a new stadium. You need a new name. There's a lot going on there.
Correct.
With the Chargers, you obviously have the quarterback. You've got some pieces, but you're in cap hell.
You're in cap hell.
So you've got to restructure there, and you've got an ownership that doesn't like to spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
So there's that issue. Seattle, to me, I think I might rank number 1. They've got a foundation that Pete and John Schneider built.
Correct.
Yep.
He's going to kind of hang around. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And you've still got Geno there, but you also have some weapons. And I think the biggest thing is, like, what kind of coach are you looking for? Because do you bring in a defensive-minded coach since the defense is the issue, even though that's what Pete
That's
Carroll
what I was thinking. That is true, though. Yeah.
That's the hard part.
Well, I mean, I think with that, you have to really sit down and think, are we going to have Geno for the next 2 or 3 years? Because I think they technically could get out of the deal after this year. Or is this a situation where we're going to draft the guy and we need to mold him? Then do you maybe lean towards the offensive-minded coach?
I think it'd be really interesting to see, because this rookie quarterback draft class could have 5 guys, 6 guys
Correct. Going to
in that conversation. As of being first-round talents, depending on the grades. And so that's where, based on where Seattle's at, you kind of look at it and go, it would be interesting
Did
to see.
JJ ever officially declare, though?
No.
He hasn't, right? I keep seeing him in mock drafts, but I was like, I didn't see him declare yet.
Draft eligible hasn't declared, which, again, I think it might depend on what Jim Harbaugh decides to do.
All right. I tend to agree with that. Who we think Dan Quinn? I mean, Dan Quinn's the obvious move here. It is interesting that this happened.
Sure.
Do Mike Vrabel and John Schneider have any connections? I think just the timing is interesting with, like,
I mean, they're both dudes. You could see them,
Real
like,
guys.
growing out together. You know?
yeah.
I mean, I could see those two, like, hanging out in Lake Washington together, or, like, ripping on a boat.
Could you see
some
Vrabel
beers.
as a Seattle guy, though? That's the question.
Maybe.
I don't think he fits
Like,
the profile of a Seattle guy.
There's a lot of timber
Yeah, I
out
agree
there.
with
You
that.
could see him as, like, a lumberjack. You could see him out there
Maybe doing something in the wilderness, maybe.
chopping some trees down or something.
Maybe.
See, like, I think John Schneider is probably easily top 5 GMs you want to get a beer with, and Vrabel's probably a top 5 coach you want to get a beer with too.
For sure.
Schneider's funny as hell.
Yeah. Well, I make this case too. Like, what organization most closely
I've had beers with
It
Schneider.
makes-
He's a great guy.
Okay. We get it. You and John are
Name drop there.
No, man. Like, I don't think I'm not. I just happen to have had beers with him. Like, had a beer with him at the combine before.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. It's been great. I'm sure you guys have had beers together, beards together too. What organization most closely mimics the Patriots? I might say the Seahawks. If you look at their run of success too in the NFC West, not having the same amount of success, but like regular season winning,
consistency
with from that perspective. Like, if you're looking for New England, but you don't want to go and follow Bill Belichick, or you don't want to work for Mr. Kraft, you look at that roster and go, I don't know about that situation if that job comes open. Seattle's kind of like the next closest thing if you're a former Patriot and you're kind of doing things that way. Just throwing that out there.
That is an interesting point. And I think you look at the Seattle roster too. You got DK,
good roster,
Lockett, JSN at wide receiver,
two bookend,
Kenneth Walker,
tackles.
Charbonnet at running back. You got an offensive line that's been reworked with Charles Cross, one of the Broncos picks up there. And then defensively, you trade for Leonard Williams. Boy Mafe had a breakout season. He was one of the guys that got with the Broncos picks too. And then Devin Witherspoon, who looks like a star. There's a lot to like here, man.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a break. So if you had to pick Mike Vrabel or Dan Quinn, who do you think?
Oh, man.
I didn't think the familiarity with Quinn just makes it too obvious. I think
he's been to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think it's Dan Quinn with Seattle.
Yeah.
I will say this:
Dan Quinn makes sense.
Yeah.
I will say this: every single one of the like the rap sheet, Schefter, the insider guys, they all tweet Chef, he's out. Every single one of them has tweeted Dan Quinn interest, and as soon as I brought it up, you mentioned Dan Quinn before even really getting. And by the way, like, shout out to Pete Carroll, awesome coach, incredible
amazing
run,
coach.
Hall of Fame.
Can I say this too?
Yeah,
it's even more so Dan Quinn if Pete Carroll remains within the organization because of the culture of that locker room.
Correct.
Like, Dan Quinn was there with him. He knows what that's like. That's a really, really unique locker room. It's super, super player-driven, player-run. And I'm not saying that, like, Mike Vrabel couldn't come in and do a great job or another coach couldn't do a great job. but Dan Quinn understands like what made that Super Bowl and the back-to-back Super Bowl teams in Seattle special and how it was led with those big personalities. Pete really embraced that. The players they draft and that are there now embrace that. They take ownership and accountability of it. You have to be a coach that's willing to adopt, I think, a similar philosophy or environment if Dan Quinn's going to stay, or excuse me, if Pete Carroll's going to stay within the organization. Because I think you're still going to have that impact in the locker room.
I think there's a reasonable case to be made if you want to be sort of connect some dots that Pete Carroll was kind of on the fence about what he wanted to do. Through some back channels, you find out, hey, do we think this is the year Dan Quinn's going to maybe make a jump away out of Dallas? He's like, his agent's like, yeah, Dan's ready for another job. And then you're like, okay, we've got a one shot to really transition with a guy who, like you say, Brady, can come in and basically knows exactly, like there's going to be very little it's just a transition. I mean, that would be, that's about as smooth as you get when you change coaches in the NFL, if that is what happened.